I don't know, does anybody in the audience have any questions? Oh, the gentleman there. You want to come over? Come, use my mic. Yeah, you can. There you go.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Ian Mitchell. I'm a town councillor in Amesbury, amongst other things. But I was particularly struck with how there seems to be a balance between fun and seriousness. And I'd welcome the panel's views on basically how serious do you have to be in order to get to the things you're actually wanting to communicate, to the self-actualization part. Because I am struck how the satellites that were put in orbit initially to carry telephone messages were saved economically because you could bounce TV signals off them. And so that's what they did with them. And so what saved Eutelsat 2F2 was probably Deep Space Nine. So some views on that, and the balance between doing your work for its own sake, which I would say is volunteer with a big V, and doing it for money, which is professional, and how does one balance it?
All right, did everyone get that, what you said there? About the professionalism and Gan, Joe, do you want to go, or Rosie?
Yeah, so basically, it's kind of like you got to like more focus for the like mindset, and try not to, lot of distractions, there's a lot of distractions, going on Facebook, YouTube and stuff. So like, when you're doing this, like you kind of like have to set yourself aside some time to do all the fun stuff, and that could be in the evening, but then during the whole day, you want to focus on like doing what you paid to do or volunteer to do. But there's certain things where I find for indie filmmaking, there's a lot of people will just do it for fun, and not really because there's a lot of people going up to me, go, oh yeah, I need to animate, Oh cool. So what's your budget? So, I don't have any money, and it's like, we do need to live. We do need to kind of survive. And then there's times, it's harder because it's more those visual effects studios. They're the ones that will pay you the money. They'll pay you, reasonably well, depending how, if you're junior, mid, or senior. And you can negotiate when you're in recruitment and all that stuff. So, but it's kind of that thing where you just got to work on your trade or what you're trained to do, and then try and get good and also get feedback. I go to this event called Bring Your Own Animation, the London SIGGRAPH event, and there's loads of animators from Ravensbourne, Escape Studios, and University of Bournemouth, and all these different universities, London, also professionals from NBC, DNEG, Framestore. And it's all about the feedback. Giving feedback. Then you can then work on what your show, what you want to put out, and then you can apply for the jobs, and then hopefully you get the job.
That was a really good question actually, because that about how far do you push yourself doing things for free until like you said, you've got bills to pay and you've got things to do. 1, 2, yeah. Oh my God. Anyway, so there's definitely a thin line between like doing something for free and then trying to get paid for it. I spent like the first 5 years of my career just doing things voluntarily, just doing things off the back of other people. But something that I've always struggled with in music is, when does it become a chore? So for me, I've always studied music. I went to the Brit School, and then I went to Guildhall School of Music and Drama to study. And after a while, it became really hard for me to differentiate, right, am I doing this because I enjoy doing it? Or am I doing it because I'm being forced to do it? Or like I'm being asked to do research, or I'm being asked to do the coursework. So... But for me, to be able to get past that is just being able to take a step back and actually taking yourself out of music for a while and taking yourself out of the creative industry for a bit. I really like going cycling and stuff, and that's nothing to do with music. And that's what kind of helps keep me balanced in like enjoying it and then not making it a chore. So yeah, that's me.
Anyone got anything?
Yeah, I don't know if we want to talk about the professional versus personal side. I think what helps me is the part of my life where I am all over films and being a little nerd and all that sort of stuff. I'm very happy to tell people and say, oh, did you watch Doctor Who, or have you finished House of the Dragon, and I've just picked up this new comic, or have you seen this new game? I think it's choosing what part of my life I'm happy to share, and then what part of my life I'm not. So I think in the professional side, it's obviously presenting yourself well, but then also being happy to talk about the films you've seen, talk about what you've been engaging with and seeing online and want to be a part of, but then being able to switch off. And personally, I like cycling. I do some ballet. I don't do it to become a ballerina. I just do it for some sport and some fun. And I'd never go into kind of a professional space and be like, oh, by the way, I go to ballet, unless it got into that conversation. But I think it's figuring out what you are comfortable telling people, and specifically professional people and that professional side of you, what you're happy to tell them, versus what you'd rather keep private. And yeah, I guess is finding the balance between being professional and who can you be more kind of geeky and nerdy with. But hopefully then find those people and you're okay with doing that. I think I've given some advice recently to people is it is important to say what you love and what you're excited about, because if you don't, people don't know. I recently worked on something and I could have kept very quiet about it, but I was telling my manager like, oh, I love this show, I am really invested in this, and that he then knew and was able to say, hey, we'd love for you to be part of it in this way. And I was like, oh my God, if I hadn't have said, you would never have asked me to do that. So I think it's, again, figuring out the balance between what you're happy for your professional life to know versus not, and then how you go about it in your professional life.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to try and work out that work-life balance, because it's always more of a personal preference or just tailored to each individual. I know, like, when I've worked with my clients or when they've first come to me, they've already kind of got like a job that they're working at beforehand, and then they would turn around and say, Daniel, I want to start a YouTube channel that eventually I want it to be my business. And even then we would have a conversation about, well, what do you want your channel to be about? And it's always about a passion that they're interested in. And then from that, usually, I still have to kind of make sure that they're aware that although this might be, a fun thing that they're doing on the side, we still have to treat it very much like you're starting a business. And you have to still have that kind of entrepreneurial mindset, even on something that you might be having as a passion. And I know with like a lot of my self-development clients, in particularly, I can think of many dating coaches that I've worked with in regards to where, some of them have 9-to-5 jobs, and then they've turned around and they said, oh, you know what, Daniel, I really love helping people. I want this to be my main career. And then we'll go out, we'll get footage, and I'll still be very blunt with them and say like that wasn't good enough. You need to do better. Here's the advice. Here's the feedback. Now we're going to film it again and we're going to do it. And certainly in those moments, they're not happy, but that content gets results when they make that really good content, and then they do find that passion in what it is that they're doing. But it's also very normal that everyone kind of experiences burnout at some point or another, even on things that they're passionate about. And the only advice I can kind of give on that, which actually I think was mentioned, was that you have to kind of have breaks here and there, that sometimes going all in on your passion, as much as, it can be a good acceleration to getting where you want to be, it can also force you to kind of have what I would call like the elastic band effects, and you can kind of spring back and go, you know what, this was too much. But yeah, and also a lot of them have been working still part-time or full-time whilst they're doing these passions, so even then they tend to get that little bit more exhausted by having to kind of start doing even more work in the time that they're doing, but making sure at least they have got that money in so they can slowly transition into their passion. So hopefully that kind of answers it. But yeah, I mean, it's really got to be more about like what would that balance look like for you, and how much time would you be able to dedicate to working on that YouTube channel or whatever platform or content that you want to be creating, and at what point would you then consider going all in on that and walking away from the stable job or income that you've got, knowing that, okay, now you're going to be a bit more in the deep end, but you've got more time to try and get clients or try and generate sales in some form or another. And I know, again, just because of the kind of clientele that I have, which are all coaches, you know, for them, the conversation we have is like, well, how many clients do you need really to be successful, till it kind of overcompensates or compensates at the very least what it was that you were making when you were working in your full-time or part-time job. And okay, coaches, they charge a couple of grand for their services. So, you know, they then realize that, okay, well, if I go all in on the marketing that I'm working on, which is essentially what platforms like YouTube or any other social media are, but certainly for me, it's YouTube, that when they're making these videos and they're expressing themselves on camera, they're putting their personality out there, and people are resonating with that, and then they realize, you know, for whatever reason or whatever the niche is, they're like, you know what, I want to go to that person because they're going to help me with these issues and topics or problems that I've got, then, you know, it just starts creating this online sales funnel of people just constantly coming in. And even just with the content that goes out, everything is what's called evergreen. It's evergreen content. So as long as it's always relevant, people will still find these videos. And I know with clients that I've got who are hypnotherapists or psychologists, where they've done videos on like how to get over your fear of spiders or heights or something, they're getting clients still from videos from like 6, 7, 8 years ago, rather than just the ones that are coming out. So, you know, you're always kind of adding to this database of content that is going out on your channel or whatever your social media platform or chosen platform is. But it's a time thing as well. And also just making sure that you aren't burning yourself out in a way that the content doesn't reach its potential. So as long as you're having regular breaks and stuff, and as long as you're working out that balance of like, okay, I need to make sure that I've still got money coming in, but I want to work on this business and I want to make it grow, whatever that may be, whatever it looks like, then yeah, you just have to work towards it. But there's no right or wrong with it, personally. So yeah, it's got to be your own balance with that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the great kind of tension at the heart of any creative job, is that most of us do it because it's fun, but if it's our job, you know, we have to get paid for it and we have to make a living and we have to figure out how we work that balance. You know, I mean, for me, you know, I'm in the kind of very privileged position of, you know, my day job is something that's very related to my hobby. You know, my profession is I'm an editor, and in that capacity, you know, I have to be a professional. I have to, you know, turn up on time and do the work and do it to a high enough standard to justify the money I'm being paid. And I have, you know, also the kind of protections and you know, guidelines that associated with that. You know, I can stop after a certain number of hours. You know, I have a contract that says what I will and won't do on a project and what I'm responsible for and what I'm not. My hobby is directing, and it is currently a hobby. You know, I've never made money from it. It's something, you know, I'd love a sideline. What I try to look at the balance in terms of, you know, how that work-life thing works up and how to balance the two is that I'm always learning. The one is always relevant to the other. So when I'm editing, even if it's, you know, the most boring corporate video, the simplest thing, something I could do in my sleep, I'm still working the muscles that I need for the more creative stuff. You know, I'm still telling a story. I'm still figuring out the best way to tell this story. And that's something that I feel, you know, I can take out of my serious job and into my fun one. And hopefully that kind of works the other way as well. The fact that, I've been so passionate about storytelling from a very young age, the fact that, my main hobby has always been film, I've always watched a lot of films, I've always been very intently focused on, how to tell stories in a visual, filmic way. That's actually, that makes me better as an editor. That's something I can bring to the table. Again, the projects might not be that interesting, it might not be something I'm passionate about, but in a way, it's something that I've been practicing. The downside with all of this is something that a lot of people have mentioned, and it's the fact that it becomes hard if you have this sort of dialogue between your work and work and play. It becomes very easy to flip into a mindset where you're always working and you're constantly on, and your personal projects are no longer a source of pleasure. They're like something else you've got to finish. And certainly I've been in a position, relatively recently where I'm doing, a 10-hour day editing someone else's film, and then I'm getting home and I'm like, right, God, I've got to put in a couple of hours editing my own film, and I really don't want to do it. And, and that there's not an easy answer, an easy solution to that. It is boring stuff like just managing your time, taking breaks, being a bit nice to yourself, figuring out a way around it. But I do think it really helps to conceptualize it as everything, if you're lucky enough to have a career in the industry that you want to be in, even if it's not the exact thing, to conceptualize it as exercise, as practice, as working those same muscles and flexing those same instincts.